guys, and welcome back to my channel. I have a super fun new project for you today. I'm gonna call this my Erica's Catch-All, and it's a nice big tote bucket. It finishes at approximately about 9 inches tall by 11 inches wide and 7 inches deep. It's a perfect craft bucket for storing yarn, or I have a bunch of my fiber in here ready to spin. You can of course put anything you want into this tote, and then I put some handles on it as well so that you can take it with you on the go. So let's go ahead and get started on this fun project. So supplies for this project are really simple. You're gonna need some kind of an interfacing, and this is just a heavy duty interfacing that I'm using. It's gonna give my bag stability, but you're welcome to make it a little bit lighter weight if you prefer that, totally up to you. You'll need some fabric for your outside of your bag, and I'm using a cotton linen. And just in case anyone is curious, I did go ahead and save the strip here. This one is called Surface by Amy Van Luke, and I purchased mine at a local store here, but I'm sure you can find something similar online. You'll need some fabric for the lining of your bag, and then I'm going to use some of the outer fabric for my inside pocket. You'll also need something for your strap, and I am just using this black cotton webbing. This is 1 1/4 inches wide webbing, and you'll need a yard of that. Then you'll also need just your regular rule, self-healing cutting mat, and a rotary trimmer, and then some coordinating thread and your sewing machine. And that's about it. One thing I did want to mention is the cutting sizes for all of these pieces will be in the description box below this video. So just click the show more link and you'll see all of that information there. Let's go ahead and get started sewing. Okay, so we're gonna just start with preparing the pocket, and I have cut my pocket at 10.5 inches by 11.5 inches, and we are gonna fold it along the 11.5 inch side in half, right sides together. So you want to fold it in such a way that you have about 5 3/4 by about 10.5 inches wide. Now, of course, you can make your inside pocket any size you want. This is just what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and leave an opening right here so that I can turn my pocket right sides out, and I'm going to sew going this direction and then up both sides, and I'm just going to back stitch right here so that the stitches hold when I turn my pocket right side out. So let's go ahead and do that first. Alright, so I'm just using a 1/4 inch seam allowance here, and I'm just going to go ahead and start. This is my folded edge up here. And then when I get to this corner down here, I'm going to leave my needle in the down position, lift up my presser foot, turn it, and continue sewing. Alright, so here is our little pocket, and since I've used like this kind of linen-y canvas, I'm going to go ahead and just clip off these corners. You don't want to clip into your stitching, but it will make the corners turn out just a slightly nicer. And then we're going to go ahead and turn our pocket right side out, so we're just going to kind of carefully do that. Sorry, here comes Jax. Oh, maybe he's not going to come into frame. He's sitting right there. Oh, yep. He's always super helpful, you guys. All right, so now that it's mostly turned right side out, I'm going to use this little tool. This is a Clover Hera marker, and I will link it below. And it's great for turning projects out right side out. And I'm just going to stick it up here in this corner, and then I kind of just run it down the seam there. And then do the same thing here. Just be careful. It is kind of sharp, so you just don't want to push so hard that you break through your fabric. But it's just a good little tool to use when you're turning pieces right side out. Okay, and then what we're going to do is take this over to my pressing board, and I'm just going to press this pocket, and then this open end right here, I'm just going to fold those sections just 1/4 inch in. They should kind of go that way naturally, like that. And I'm just going to press all of this down, and then I'm going to take it over to my sewing machine and just run a top stitch along this folded top, just so that it has a finished look when we attach it to our lining. Okay, so here's our pocket, and we still have our opening down here. It's just been pressed nicely, and then we ran just a quick straight stitch along this top just to give it a more finished look. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is center our pocket on one of the pieces of lining, and I'm going to go ahead and place it 1, 2, 3, about 4 inches down from the top, and then try and just center it horizontally on my sides. So that's at about 4.5, and that's at about 4.5, so that's almost perfect right there. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab a couple of pins and just pin this in place. All right, so I've just pinned this in place, and then what we're going to do is take it over to our sewing machine. We're going to do a back stitch at the stop and start. We're going to go down one side all across the bottom, and just make sure that you're closing up this opening as you sew across the bottom of your pocket, and then back up this side and then back stitch again. And because this is kind of a wider pocket, you can leave it that way, but I think I'm also going to run a vertical strip down the center so that I have 2 smaller pockets. That's totally optional. I'm just going to find the center of my pocket. It looks like it's about 10 inches. So I'm just going to make a mark at about 5 inches in. And I'm just going to use this friction erasable pin, and again, I will link these in the description box below. So they come off with heat, so when I'm done I can just iron this and the line will be gone. So let's go ahead and go over to our sewing machine and sew our pocket down. So we've attached our pocket, and we just want to make sure that the pocket openings are facing up. And we're going to go ahead and take our other piece of lining now, and we are going to place these 2 pieces right sides together. If you're new to sewing, the right side is just the side with the design or print on it. If you're using a solid, then it doesn't really matter which side is the right side if one looks better. And then I'm just going to stick a couple pins just so that they don't move around on me. Okay, and then I have placed a couple pins down here just so that I can keep track of my stop and start points. And Jax has decided to become part of this video, so I apologize. So similar to the pocket, what we're going to do, we're going to leave the top edge open. We're going to sew down the sides and across to about here. Then we're going to pick up back here, sew across, and then all the way up the other side. I am going to back stitch at the top corners and then down here at these sections as well. We're going to leave this section right here open so that we can turn our bag right side out when the time comes. So for the lining and the outside of the bag, we're going to use more than 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to use this second line on my machine here, which is about 1/2 inch. You just want a little bit more of a seam allowance for this, so just as long as you're consistent on both your lining and your outer piece, you will be fine. Okay, so here's our lining, and we're going to go ahead and set it aside for right now, but we should have our top completely open and then our bottom with just our little hole for turning. So let's go ahead and set our lining aside for right now. We're going to work on the outside of our bag. So I'm going to go ahead, I don't think I can fit this all in my frame. Oh, it is fitting. Okay. So I've got my interfacing right here, and I'm going to go ahead and actually spray it with a little bit of 505 temporary adhesive. And I'm sorry, I always forget to show this in the supplies list, but it will be listed in the below this video. And I'm just going to spray just a little bit on here just so that it kind of stays in place. You could also use fusible fleece for this step if you wanted, but that's just going to help everything stay in place when we go to sew this together, because this is quite a bit of bulk with this heavier interfacing. And then we're going to go ahead and just lay our fabric on top of this and just straighten it all out, get it all nice and smoothed out and kind of stuck down. If you didn't put on enough spray, you can do that now. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and take the outside of our bag now and fold it right sides together, and just make sure that your fabric stayed nice and straight and it didn't get bunched up in here or anything. And then what we're gonna do is take this over to our machine and just sew down this side and down this side. And I am gonna backstitch up here at the tops. And then we're gonna leave the top of our bag open. So whatever seam allowance you did for your lining, make sure you do that same seam allowance here on the outside of your bag. So here we are, we've got the outside of our bag with our lining, and we're gonna go ahead and box the bottom so we have a nice big boxy rectangle to keep lots of goodies in. So the way that I like to box my bottoms is to go ahead and stick my hand in and make sure that you're going in between the outside layers. You don't want to be going in between the fabric and the lining. And then I'm just gonna place my thumbs down here in these corners, or my hands, and then I'm gonna fold this actually in half. And this is a little finicky because our interfacing is a little bit thicker. And then we're just going to put them together so we've kind of got this sandwich thing happening, and then I'm gonna turn it sideways. And then what I'm gonna do is just line up these side seams, if that makes sense. Okay, so hopefully you can see those there. So we've got our side seams lined up nice and good. Oops, sorry. And then we're just gonna pat everything down so it's nice and flat, and then we can kind of pull this one back and out of our way. And just make sure that you've got it pulled all the way to the seam. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it so that I can get to it a little bit easier and fold one side back. And then we're gonna use our square ruler to box our bottoms here. And I'm gonna line up this 45-degree diagonal with one of the 45-degree diagonals right here. And for this project, I'm going to put it at 3.5 inches. So here's my 3.5 inch marker. Actually, maybe if I do this way, you can see a little bit better. So here's my 3.5 inch marker. My line is lined up with the diagonal of my fabric. And again, my 3.5 marker is right here at this point. I'm going to go ahead then and draw a line right along this, like so. And then I'm gonna take this to the machine and sew right along this line. And I'm gonna backstitch at the start and stop, and then I'm gonna cut it away right here at about 1/2 inch from my stitch line. And we're gonna repeat that on this other side as well. Okay, and then whatever size boxy bottom you've done on the outside, we're also going to do that on the lining. So here's our lining piece. I'm going to use the exact same method. I'm just going to place my hands down here in the corners and then kind of fold it in half nicely so that I've got my little sandwich here. Turn it to the side, and then again line up these side seams so that those are straight. And just take your time with this, just smooth everything out so it's nice and straight. You'll have a much better result in the end. Okay, so I think that's pretty good. I'm gonna just flip this one out of the way. Just make sure everything looks nice and straight. And again, I did 3.5 inches on the outside of the bag, so I'm going to do 3.5 inches on the lining. I forgot to mention, because this is so stiff, it's kind of holding itself, but you can throw some wonder clips on here to hold the corners in place while you bring it to your machine. And then for the lining, I'm going to use a couple of pins. I'm going to do the same thing to this side. Okay, and just like the other side, again, we're going to sew right on this line, backstitch at your stop and start, and then we'll cut about 1/2 inch away. so here is our outside of our bag and here is our lining. We're gonna leave the lining inside out, but we're gonna go ahead and turn our bag right side out, or our basket. Okay, so the bottoms of our outside of our bag should be looking like this now. Yay, looks like we did a good job there. We're gonna kind of just fold that in so it's out of our way. Our bag should be looking like this. We're gonna go ahead and add our straps now. So I'm just gonna take one of these strap lengths. I cut mine to 15 inches. Like I said, you can cut to whatever you prefer. And then I'm just gonna line up my bag here on my table and just decide where I want my straps to be. And I think what I'm gonna do is about 5.5 inches in from each side. So here's my 5.5 marker there. So I wanna scoot this one out just a little bit. You can of course place your straps wherever you want, but if you want to make the same one I did 5.5 inches on either side of our straps here. We're gonna go ahead and flip it and do the exact same thing on the other side. And I can see my other straps here, so I'm just gonna go ahead and place these on and see how close I am. Just make sure that you don't have your handles twisted in any way. 5.5 and pretty good, 5.5, okay. Okay, so we are gonna go ahead and take our outside of our bag, again it's right sides out, and we're gonna put it inside our lining piece, still inside out. And then you just want to make sure to tuck your handles down inside as well. And what I like to do is line up these side seams first, and I'll just stick a Wonder Clip over here. And then I'll do this one. And then once I have my side seams done, then I'll go ahead and attach the others, and you can just reuse these ones that are holding your straps on. Okay, and then we're gonna take this whole thing over to the sewing machine, and we're just gonna sew all down the top of this edge all the way around our bag. I am gonna start on a side seam and go around. I will stop back stitch where I stop and start, and I'm gonna use about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So here's what our project should be looking like. We're gonna go ahead and carefully turn our bag through this bottom hole here. And you're just gonna need to be a little bit careful so that you don't tear it too much getting your bag through. So just be gentle. And you should have a handle sticking out on each side as well. And then we're gonna go ahead and take this opening back over to the sewing machine. And I'm just gonna finger press mine, but you can press it with the iron as well. And we're just gonna run a stitch down this edge to close up this opening. All right, so we are all done closing up our opening here, and I'm just going to trim off these little threads. And then we're gonna go ahead and push our lining down inside of our bucket. And then I'm gonna just leave my lining showing on the outside. It's a little bit easier with this thicker interfacing as well. And I'm just gonna take this over to my sewing machine and run a stitch right down this seam. Just don't get your handle in it. So just run right along this seam right here. That'll keep the lining in place, and it just kind of gives your bag a more finished edge. And that's it, guys. We have a nice fun tote with a really nice big boxy bottom down here. This thicker interfacing is great. It stands up on its own. All you need to do is fill it up with goodies and you're all set.